It was difficult. I think any sort of seismic shift like that you get is difficult. And I know, I mean, there weren't a lot of them, thankfully, and we certainly worked very hard to make sure that was the case, but there were staff who just didn't want to make that transition to the new way of doing things and chose not to. And that was with the introduction of computers and so on. There were library users who had never used a keyboard in their life and were really reticent about, felt they had to go to staff in order to find, check collection holdings and so on. But like many of these things, it takes a bit of time and people get used to it and people make the transition. The same will be true, I think, in a number of aspects of our service with respect to self-serve and how self-serve works in our branches and our buildings and the increasing acceptance of self-serve. I mean, I know for myself, it's an analogy I would use about, I would prefer now to go to a self-serve gasoline pump and pump my own gas than have somebody else do it for me, thank you very much. And when you think about the importance of issues like privacy and so on, a lot of people are going to prefer to check their own books out as long as it is understandable, straightforward, and that they have confidence in the system. So I think that those kinds of transitions people can make, but people have to be assisted, they have to be prompted, they have to be guided in making those. And the same in part is true for staff. It's going to be, I think, a really interesting time in terms about how content is available and distributed in our communities. I think that my position about the role of libraries has changed somewhat, probably in a most pronounced way over the last 10 or 15 years. It used to be that collections were paramount. I think that collections are still going to be hugely important, but probably not perhaps even the main raison d'etre for public libraries in our community. The increasing importance of public space, which is tied again to my comments about the importance of new buildings that have come on stream, how people come to us to do a variety of different activities in the physical space that is non-judgmental, is public space accessible to all, where people can be there with their own goals without somebody imposing an agenda on them or requiring them to belong to a group or a class or whatever. You can come here on your own, do your own work, but be surrounded by people who believe in the same kinds of things that you believe in. And I think that that's really important and powerful in our society. So I think we're going to have to find other ways, if you will, to measure our contributions and our successes. Less emphasis on circulation, although it will still be important, but less emphasis on circulation, more emphasis on user visits, and to whatever extent we can get to it, the actual impact that we have on people's lives in our community, which I think is hugely important. So I think that we're going to see a period for public libraries moving forward where there would be a somewhat lessening of emphasis on collections, and that will take place probably over a 20 or 30 year period. I think, and ironically, but I think for very sound reasons, books will probably be the most resilient of the physical sort of content media. We're going to see some of the audiovisual, whether it's DVDs or CDs and so on, those are much more at risk of disappearing. But the print on paper book, I think, will still have real staying power and will still be at the center of public library service for a long time to come. But we're also going to see, parallel to that, an increasingly important delivery of content through the digital media, through online, through streaming, and probably different roles for the library in terms of how our function will merge perhaps a bit with what some of the neighborhood houses are doing, certain roles that community centers play, and we're going to see, I think, a different view of how these different agencies operate in the city. Well, when I say this, I'm talking about over 20 or 30 years. This is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. I think that's absolutely true, and I think that's always been the case, that there are people that really value the institution, although they themselves are not making daily or monthly even use of it. Their use may be very intermittent, but it may be their grandchildren are using it, or their children, or their grandparents may be using it, and that for them is important. And I think it's the role of the library as a great leveler in our society can't be underestimated, but at the same time, our future existence probably would not be sustainable at the level it is now if we just serve marginalized users. I think that we have to maintain our service mix. we do have to address the needs of people who are technologically savvy, who have handheld devices and other types of equipment, and will be looking to engage with us in that way. At the same time, trying to make sure that nobody gets left behind. So I think both aspects are really important. I am confident that when it comes to textual content like words, that there will continue to be an important role for the public library as kind of cooperative, if you will, in terms of ensuring accessibility without cost, without direct charge, to the residents of our community, so it is that level playing field, to use the overused cliche. At the same time, that we have to ensure that we're also out there for people who are a little more cutting edge, a little more advanced, and ensuring that we're also meeting their needs and providing some services and access for them.